Welcome to The Drummer and the Great Mountain, a podcast where we share effective tips and practices for working with adult ADD, ADHD in a natural, effective way without the use of medications. Each episode, join me, your host, Batman Saram, along with the author of The Drummer and the Great Mountain, Michael Joseph Ferguson. Join Michael and myself in an interactive discussion of sharing our stories as we journey together in transforming what can be the gift of being what we call hunter types. This podcast is intended to be your audio companion to the book written by Michael, who joins me each episode where we both will strive to foster dialogue, give you our personal insights, and share both of our experiences on this similar path that we are all on. Our intention and hope is that along with the book, this podcast gives you an additional perspective as you listen to us delve deeper into each chapter of the book to give you even more tools to go along with what it is that you are reading. Visit us at drummerandthegreatmountain.com to purchase the book and look for more tools, tips, and updates, as well as giving us feedback on this podcast. Join our growing global community of creative types, entrepreneurs, and out-of-the-box thinkers on our shared journey. Welcome to The Drummer and the Great Mountain podcast.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Michael Joseph Ferguson. How are you all doing? For those of you in the Northern Hemisphere, happy springtime. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing the connection between the hunter-farmer theory of ADHD and the terms neurodiversity and neurodivergent. So this is an episode I've been wanting to do for a while, and then a few weeks ago, there was a scientific paper that came out, a study from the Royal Society suggesting that ADHD traits may have been beneficial to our hunter-gatherer ancestors. And I sent that out in an email. You may have read it, and I just felt like, okay, it's time for me to do this episode. So we're going to be exploring the terms neurodivergent, neurodiversity. Where do those come from? We're also going to be talking about how they connect with this idea of the hunter-farmer theory. What's that about? We're going to actually just talk through it again and say, here's what it is. But then we're going to zoom out and say, okay, why is this important? How does this actually help me to have this particular viewpoint of ADHD instead of just using the term ADHD? So along with this, there will be a free PDF. You can get chapter 2 of my book, The Drummer and the Great Mountain, if you'd like to read it as you go through, because it's going to go much more in depth than what we're going to talk about today. You can get that by going to drummerandthegreatmountain.com/episode 106. Okay, so one quick announcement. We have our next time management online workshop coming up on May 4th and May 7th. I know a lot of you have been asking about this one. This is a 2-day workshop. We've been teaching ADHD time management for many years now. This is our master course, and it's focusing on creating systems that support greater accomplishment, consistency, and follow-through. And most of us really struggle with conventional time management systems and techniques. That's the issue. So we've made it a study of building time management systems that work for us, and how do we approach them in such a way where we can stay with them. So our hyper-creative, non-linear brain works differently, and we require different systems that feel more intuitive to us. So each time we do this, I add a few more things. In this session, I'm going to be adding how to work with Kanban tools in a way that feels intuitive for us. So things like Trello and Asana and a few other ways that you've used in work or school, and then you realize, it doesn't flow with me. So we're going to be talking about how to use those tools in such a way that may make more sense to you. So again, this is a 2-day workshop, May 4th and May 7th. If you're in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the second session may be a better time for you. So you can listen to the recording of session 1, attend the second session, ask questions. So if you're interested, go to drummerandthegreatmountain.com/workshop, and would love to connect with all of you. And I just want to give a shout out to everyone who's joined us in the last couple workshops since the beginning of the year. It's been so awesome to connect with all of you. It's good to get emails from you, hearing how you're doing after the workshops. Thank you for all the positive feedback, and I hope you're all doing well, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you during the year. Okay, let's start with the problem. So the problem is that the term ADHD is very limited. It's a poor name for how we're wired. It doesn't give you all of the positive traits that can come with our wiring. It's a label that implies that we're broken, we have a disorder, there's something we need to fix. And it's that particular impetus of thinking, okay, I'm broken, I need to fix myself in some way. That's the problem. So what's the solution? So the solution is to take a more broader view of ADHD. And terms like neurodivergent, neurodiversity, and the hunter-farmer theory all go into seeing ADHD from a much broader perspective that implies the key benefits of being wired this way, the clarity about what are the challenges, and recognizing that these gifts that we have can also be cultivated to benefit ourselves, but also benefit society. Okay, so let's dig into this. So the article that came out a few weeks ago, it was a newly published study by the Royal Society finding that attributes connected to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder may have helped early hunter-gatherers when foraging for food. The findings suggest that ADHD behaviors may be a genetic adaptation to certain environments and may explain why traits such as distractibility and impulsivity may still be with us today in certain neurodivergent individuals. Okay, so let's start with what is the hunter-farmer theory? Let's start there. You've heard me talk about it on the podcast, but let's bring it back up and say, okay, what exactly is this theory? What does it mean? And why is it important to us? So I'm going to read from the book, Drummer in the Great Mountain, and just pulling out some excerpts from the hunter-farmer theory chapter. The hunter-farmer theory of ADHD was first proposed by Tom Hartman in his 1993 book, Attention Deficit Disorder, A Different Perception. Up until approximately 10,000 years ago, a blip on the human evolutionary map, human beings needed to be hunters in order to survive. Once agriculture was adopted, the survival landscape shifted. Existence was now predicated upon people staying in one place, doing the same tasks day in and day out in order to provide for themselves. So let's take a look at these two very different lifestyles. The hunter requires a very specific set of traits in order to survive and complete the task at hand. So first off, hyper-focus for short, intense periods of time, an ability to be distractible, scanning the horizon for game or a potential threat, sensitivity to the surrounding environment, listening for the slightest twig break or sensing the most infinitesimal movement, the capacity to be completely in the moment, energy output consisting of times of high energy followed by times of relaxation after the hunt, and your time horizon is minutes and seconds, not months and years. Whereas the farmer requires a nearly opposite set of skills, an ability to do the same task day in and day out, a capacity to maintain focus and not get distracted. This translates into having successful crops, which your very survival depends upon. A steady day in, day out, even energy output, and a time horizon that consists of months and years. Rewards happen much slower, and there is a need for always coming back to the big picture. Most of our ancestors were farmers, but all of our ancestors were hunters. No matter your nationality or the color of your skin, every human being on the planet is descended from hunter-gatherers. So simply put, the hunter-farmer theory proposes that people with ADHD are actually hunter types. We have inherited certain genetic traits and tendencies from our hunter ancestors that would have been positive attributes necessary for survival. With some awareness, these same traits, which are often labeled ADHD symptoms, can also be extremely valuable in the modern world as well. So I want to add one note here, which is that I would say about 60 to 70% of the people that join our workshops are women. And so we've had many discussions about this in the past about the term hunter type and women. And I think I want to send one article. I want to attach it to this podcast called The Myth of Man and the Hunter, Women's Contribution to the Hunt Across Ethnographic Contexts. So more and more studies are coming out stating that women in hunter-gatherer cultures were hunters as well. So I want to take a moment to promote some of Tom Hartman's books. There's definitely a few of them you really want to check out. So the original one, attention deficit disorder, a different perception, that's where he first introduced the concept of the hunter-farmer theory. But the one that I really spent a lot of time with was the Edison gene. That one is excellent. He further clarifies it. He goes into some of the potential genetics around it. So that's one I would definitely check out. The two other ones I would check out are ADHD, A Hunter in a Farmer's World, and How to Succeed as a Hunter in a Farmer's World. Those are all very much worth checking out. I will leave a link to his Amazon author page in the podcast notes. Okay, so that's the hunter-farmer theory in a nutshell. Let's talk about neurodiversity and neurodivergent. What do they mean? Where does that come from? Okay, so the term neurodiversity was first coined by Australian sociologist Judy Singer in the late 1990s. The neurodiversity movement suggests that neurological differences should be recognized and respected just like any other human variation, including gender, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. So the term neurodivergent was later derived from the concept of neurodiversity to describe individuals whose brain functions differently from what is considered typical or neurotypical. This term is used to include a wide range of neurological conditions, including ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and more. It serves to unite people with various neurological conditions under a common identity that emphasizes difference without deficiency. So their goal was to foster a more inclusive society that values and supports all kinds of cognitive functioning. This perspective encourages viewing ADHD and other conditions not merely as disabilities, but as differences that come with their own sets of strengths and challenges. So clearly, the hunter-farmer theory fits nicely within the concepts of neurodivergent and neurodiversity as it relates to ADHD. Much of our struggles are contextual, directly connected to survival in the modern world, from sitting still in class to writing reports and handling non-stimulating admin tasks, lack of exercise, too much screen time, isolation, hyper-individualism, poor diet, all greatly contribute to our symptoms. It's so important to recognize that piece. So I want to take a moment and talk about the term hunter type. So that's a term I coined when I was writing the book, The Drummer in the Great Mountain, out of necessity, because I got to the place where I was like, what do I call us? The whole point of the book was to propose that ADHD is a neurological type and not necessarily a disorder. And when I was writing the book, I couldn't figure out, well, what do I say? Do I call us hunters? That felt a little weird. That didn't feel quite right. But I didn't want to use the term ADHD because that was the whole point of the book, was to propose some other perception of how do we look at ourselves. And so I came up with the term hunter type, and that's a combination of neurological type, seeing us as a specific neurological type, and the hunter-farmer theory. So one of the key pieces to the hunter-farmer theory is it's a really good metaphor. And we love metaphor and story. We take those in much deeper than we do facts and figures. So people can recite every word from the movie Star Wars, but no one can recite word for word a scientific paper on genotype-based variations of default network activity and its relationship to striatal DAT binding. We can't do it, right? Our brains don't take it in, but our brains love story and metaphor. We're wired for it. Therefore, it makes sense to have a metaphor that contains many of the items we need to be aware of that can potentially make our life more fulfilling and less stressful. So the hunter-farmer theory is an exceptional working model to target areas that really support us in being happier and more productive. Recognizing we work in bursts, understanding our sensitivity and why it's important and how it can support us in our life. Understanding why we get distracted, the importance of movement and exercise, having a high-protein, low-carb diet to support our brain chemistry, eating a diet that's more connected to nature, eliminating chemical preservatives, eliminating highly processed foods. All those things make our life better, and they fit really nicely within this idea of hunter-gatherer societies and how we can then take that aboard ourselves. So those actions are really helpful on one level, but then there's this deeper piece, which is that the way we live in modern society can and often contributes to mental illness. I've been a life coach since 2007. I've worked with thousands of people at this point. It's absolutely clear to me that societal expectations are highly dysfunctional and contribute greatly to mental illness. It's undeniable. Dr. Gabor Mate released a book called The Myth of Normal. He talks about this. It's important for us to recognize that we are not in the healthiest culture. We are not in a culture where there's elders looking around saying, okay, let's look for the well-being of the whole tribe, and does introducing this particular technological gadget really contribute to our well-being, or does it not? There's no one moderating anything. It's just a free-for-all. And so when we start to look at our old brain and how it handles survival, it's constantly being triggered. So we're always anxious. Instead of like survival being connected to going out foraging for food, survival is this very abstract thing. And because of it, our levels of anxiety are just through the roof. So when we look at how we live, if we accept this as being a healthy culture, then we're the broken ones. But if we step back and go, wait a minute, maybe our culture is kind of messed up, we can kind of take a breath and go, okay, maybe there's another way to approach our society. Maybe it's like going to another country where we don't speak the language. Are we broken because we can't speak the language? No, but we probably do need to survive there. We need to be able to get food and talk to people and interact, right? So it's a different way of perceiving that can make all the difference. A few more points on hunter-gatherer cultures and indigenous cultures at large is that they don't perceive themselves as separate from nature. So they respect and honor that their bodies are part and connected to all of the natural systems around them, which is the truth. Modern humans, we perceive ourselves as separate from nature. That is a kind of insanity, but it's real. If you think about it, most of us look outside and go, well, that's nature. Those are birds, and I'm in here. I'm separate from that. And what that leads to is destruction of the environment, because it's not part of us. It's something separate from us. It leads to us not being fully in our bodies and taking good care of our physical bodies. All of these things lead to a sense of isolation from nature. Nature is something separate from us. And that thought form, it's speculated, came in when we became agricultural 10,000 years ago, because we felt like, okay, now we can control nature. We can now do animal husbandry. We are no longer part of nature. We are separate from it, and we can dominate nature. It's at that point that I think humanity made an interesting shift that we are still feeling the repercussions of today. So the benefit of recognizing that you are actually part of the natural system around you is you no longer feel separate from the rest of the world. You are part of it. You're embedded in that. And again, I think there's a kind of mental illness that comes from this misperception that we are not part of nature. And so when we embrace something like the hunter-farmer theory, it brings us back to, oh yeah, this is the truth. The truth is I'm part of the natural systems around me. So if you're interested in exploring more in terms of nature connection, I want to point you towards the work of Richard Louv. And he wrote a book called Last Child in the Woods. He also coined the term nature deficit disorder. Outstanding work, highly recommended. I also want to promote the work of John Young, that's Jon. He wrote a book called What the Robin Knows, and he's done tons of work in terms of building programs that support nature connection, especially in schools. Outstanding work, can't say enough about him. And Micah Mortali wrote a book called Rewilding. That is also an outstanding book. I've actually been in contact with him, hoping to have him on the podcast soon. And if you haven't already, I want to encourage you to check out our episode 82 with Kathleen Lockyer. It's called The Science of Nature Connection. That's an excellent interview, and also talks about this concept of nature connection and why it can be so supportive to us when we're wired this way. And she talks a bit about her experience with working with ADHD kids and how much they benefit from nature connection activities. And one other note in terms of looking at the hunter-farmer theory and how it relates to our nervous system. So our nervous system is set into two different categories typically when we're studying it: the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system, you can think of it as going on the hunt. It's that hyper focus. Everything's razor clear. You're either going to fight or flight. That is definitely old wiring that kept us alive for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And when you think about the parasympathetic nervous system, that's the rest and digest. That's going on the hunt and then resting. That is the cycle that we would have been on in a hunter-gatherer society, and that would directly relate to the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So I think a really key piece to remember here is that it's only been a couple hundred years since the Industrial Revolution. It's only been a couple hundred years since we've been living in a quote-unquote modern way. And maybe 80 years since highly processed foods have come into the modern diet. Then let's add in technology and smartphones and hyperstimulation. If we don't recognize that's brand new in the human diet, and our bodies do not evolve that quickly. It takes much longer for evolution to help us process all of these new things. So if we don't understand that, it's really easy to just judge ourselves. So when we take a step back and we look at the terms neurodivergent and we look at the hunter-farmer theory, the key piece here is we are important to society. All of these terms are ways of regaining our sense of dignity. We are important members of society that introduce new ideas. We have the capacity to inspire, uplift, and we're also deeply empathic. So when we fully take in this idea that we're not broken, but we are very specific, our nervous system is very specific, how we function is very specific, and it's up to us to start creating those boundaries and taking those actions to fully maximize our potential. When we fully do that, the shame starts to go away, we start to feel a sense of empowerment, and we can start working within the bounds of what we've been given. Okay, so that's my take. I hope there's some bits there that are inspiring to you. I know this was more of a conceptual episode, but I think it's important to take a step back occasionally and look at, well, what are these terms that we're throwing around? What is the hunter-farmer theory? What does neurodivergent really mean? What was that pointing towards? So I'm going to leave a couple links for you. So the first thing is, if you'd like to get chapter 2 of my book, The Drummer in the Great Mountain, that talks about the hunter-farmer theory, you can get that by going to drummerinthegreatmountain.com/episode 106. I'll also include a link in the podcast notes on the ADHD hunter-gatherer study that just came out, in case you missed that email. I'll also include a link to an article called Woman the Hunter that talks about women as hunters and hunter-gatherer societies. You can check that out. And if you'd like to join us in our upcoming time management workshop that will be happening on May 4th and May 7th, you can go to drummerinthegreatmountain.com/workshop. I will leave that link in the description as well. Hope you can join us. It's always great for us all to get together, talk through these things. I've added a few things to this time management workshop since the last one. So if you want to join us again, we'd love to have you. And until next time, be well.
Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about the book, The Drummer in the Great Mountain, visit drummerandthegreatmountain.com. To join us on social media, click the links at the top of the homepage. Help us spread the word. We're a small press and reviews really help. If you've been enjoying the podcast or the book, consider writing a review on iTunes, Amazon, Goodreads, or your podcast app. If you're new to the podcast and want to quickly get up to speed on the concepts we discuss, check out our free 5-day mini course. Visit drummerandthegreatmountain.com/mini course. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover on future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Please send us an email at info@drummerandthegreatmountain.com.